Welcome back, Guardians, to another Dream Team video. I'm your humble host, Meeson777, and off of a last video where I discussed the Hunter exotics that were less used, you guys all wanted to see how I would propose a change to the Aeon Cultist exotics, which seems fair. They're pretty much the least used exotic in the entire game. I don't know of anybody who seriously uses them. I never see anybody run them outside of people who are trying to light level. So, how do we fix them? Because even though I've got on my Hunter here with my Aeon gauntlets a beautiful 67 stat roll with a 28 intellect and a 23 mobility, it is still just not worth it for me to run these gauntlets, because I could be running Stompies, I could be running the Gemini Jesters, which are my favorite Hunter exotics. Hell, I could be running even something silly like the Assassin's Cowl or something funny like the Lucky Pants. So before we get too far into this, let's discuss what they do. I think it's good to understand the baseline of what it is that they do. The Aeon Swifts, the Aeon Soul, and the Aeon Safes for Hunter, Warlock, and Titan respectively provide energy depending on the type of character that you're using. For Hunters it's dodges, for Warlocks it's grenades, for Titans it's melees. They each provide energy for other people running these exotics, or a small portion of it if they're not running these exotics, for those types of abilities. For example, if I'm running the Aeon Swifts as a Hunter and I dodge, Warlocks and Titans get grenades and melee energy respectively. If they're running the exotics, they get more energy. In certain situations, this can be very good. But here's the problem. If we make him too worth it, we step ourselves into the Aeon Cult meta. Which, I mean, it might be fun for a little bit, but I can promise you it will quickly lose its charm. Imagine a world where everyone in Trials always runs the Aeon exotics, and you start to get these weird team comps where it's like nothing but Warlocks spamming grenades constantly. Like I said, the novelty would wear off really fast. And that's the primary issue with these exotics. The scalability with these is difficult to achieve. If you make them give too much energy, then they become overpowered. If you have them where they are now, where they don't reward enough, then they're unused. If you make it so that they're too good with a group of people, then they become really niche and overpowered in highly competitive situations. If you make them too good without having other people running the exotics, they become just an auto pick for a lot of different builds. They're difficult to balance, and I don't by any means propose that I have the optimal solution to these. I'm just throwing out an idea. Now, I think it's fair that I give some credit where credit's due to some people who have come up with other ideas about this. One of the possibly best ideas I have seen is on Reddit. I don't know the Reddit user, I just saw it in glancing. I apologize if you're watching this video, Mr. Reddit user, but the gist is that he proposed, why not have these have the effect that they have right now, while also giving a similar effect to the Helm of Inmost Light, or excuse me, it's called the Heart of Inmost Light now and back in D2, where essentially using one ability gives energy to your other abilities. And I think that's cool, but it doesn't, I don't think it rewards enough. I still don't think it rewards enough to the people who run them all together. The difficult thing with these is that they've essentially faced three primary areas where they have to be balanced from. First and foremost, the obvious one, they have to be usable, not even necessarily good, but usable by themselves. Like with no other people running the cultist exotics, they have to be at least passable. Number two, another obvious one, they have to be good that they reward you to coordinate with your team, that if you're using them with other people running the cultist exotics, the Aeon exotics, you get a decent benefit. And it's worth it. This is a sub-part to this issue. It's worth it to run those over other more powerful options, like I mentioned for Hunter, like Stompies or Gemini Jesters or whatever it may be, right? Worth it to run these exotics over those exotics. And the last thing that we run into is that it can't be too niche. Because here's the thing. These things right now, in terms of their design, are doing a good job of not being too niche in any one category. What I mean by that is that in one particular game mode, they're not more powerful than in other game modes. There's going to be an exception to the rule with that, which I'll explain in just a second. So, for example, sixes, these can work in sixes. You can take these into 6v6, you got a decent team, they'll be just fine. You take these into 3v3s, they'll be just fine. Nightfalls, they'll be just fine. Fill in the blank, they'll be just fine, right? That's the currently, for design, that's what they're achieving well, I would argue. Now, those other two categories are the things that they are not achieving well in. And it's difficult because those three things really spread yourself thin on how you can design these. But I think I have a solution. So, first of all, let's kind of work backwards on this. Let's address the niche issue. Let's make it so that by yourself and with a team essentially achieves two different versions of the niche. Where if you're essentially by yourself, it is able to do well in a specific niche in one different type of game mode, and if you're with a bunch of people, it does better in another type of game mode. Make it so that per each of the Hunter, Warlock, and Titans, their ability, dodge, grenade, and melee, have it so that when these other Aeon Cultists use those abilities on an enemy, it marks them, just like how the One-Eyed Mask used to. It marks them through walls for a very brief period of time to other guardians running the Aeon Cultist. For example, if I'm a Titan, I have the Aeon safes equipped, and I punch somebody. To my other Aeon Cultists, they would then see them marked through walls, just like the One-Eyed Mask does, just like the Top Tree Tether does, for a small period of time, maybe 6 seconds. Maybe that's a little too long, but of course you can adjust it as we see fit, so that when my other Aeon Cultists get a kill on that marked target, I get my energy back. Maybe not completely, but let's say like half. Because that requires a good level of coordination in order to make work, but it also allows me as another Aeon user to focus in and dial in on what it is I'm going to be doing. Exotics do well when they become essentially a little bit of a mini game. You guys remember Zalo's Supercell back in D1? Part of the reason that exotic was so loved is that because it essentially became a mini game to get those double kills with the arc in order to get your super energy back. It rewarded you, and it had something different in the game. What this essentially opens up is not only rewarding you for having these exotics equipped, right? You get to see a marked target through walls, which can be incredibly helpful, but it also allows you to get a decent amount of payoff for doing it. And it allows me to focus in and understand exactly what I need to do in a very clear sense. Would this be overpowered in something like Trials? Perhaps, and we can think about that here. How would the Hunter dodge work, you might be asking, because obviously the Titan can punch something into it, mark them to other cultists. The Warlock can throw a grenade and mark them accordingly. What would the Hunter do? Well, that dodge, I think, could work very similarly to how the Gemini Jesters work, where if they're within a certain radius, and, even maybe, if we can even keep the Gemini Jesters effect where it, marks them, it hits them through a surface, of course, it would not do the blinding effect, right? But if they're within a certain radius and you dodge near them, it would cause the same marking effect. Maybe even have the same type of blast radius. If you want to make it easier for programming side of things, Bungie, make it so that that blast radius is exactly the same, but it doesn't actually cause a blinding effect. You can already achieve something similar right now to the people who are saying that this might be a little overpowered. You can already achieve something similar with the Gemini Jesters right now. If you dodge near a surface or near a wall, you can see the damage numbers pop up through a surface and get a general idea of where they are. Obviously, you're not going to be getting that blinding effect, which is the core piece of the Gemini Jesters. And again, I think that this would be pretty good in something like a 6v6 environment, because if you've got a bunch of people running this, then you're going to be able to see a lot of marks, get your energy back, and stay generally aware of what's happening. Of course, it would still require the other person to make a mistake. Getting punched, you're pretty much already dead anyway. Getting grenaded, you're pretty much already dead anyway. Getting dodged next to would probably be the difficult thing to bounce around, but I'm sure you guys can be logical and say, maybe it doesn't mark as long, or maybe you have to be right on top of them when you dodge so you can get an idea of how that works. But what about if you don't have other people running these Aeon exotics? How would you make them so that they're still usable? Well, we could do the similar thing where we make it so that, let's say, if you use your dodge as a hunter, it gives your other abilities some energy, right? It kind of gives you just some general energy feedback, which is a fine idea. One idea I would really love to see is a similar effect to how the Crest of Alpha Lupi works back in D1. The gist is that when you would res somebody, you would pick somebody up who was down, they would get a small amount of super energy. We're talking very little amounts, maybe an eighth of a percent. We're talking teeny tiny amounts, enough that it's noticeable but nothing to write home about, and you res people a little bit faster. Again, that's one of those things where it starts to get difficult to balance specifically, but I think the idea of rewarding the res, maybe if it gave you your energy back when you get a res, it could be usable in Nightfalls. You can make it really, really worth your while in Trials. Something like the Apotheosis Veil, for example. Maybe you can get an extended overshield, or get your health back, or get your abilities back. You know, any one of those things. Obviously, all those together would be ridiculous. But let's say somebody goes down, you pick them up, you immediately get a good portion of energy back. They don't even have to be wearing the exotics either. They can just be a portion of what it is that you do. I think this also plays into the lore text of this, saying we are unique emanations of the same shared light, right? Each kind of feeding into it. Another idea I had, make it so that when you pick up an orb of light, you get a very small overshield for a brief period of time. Maybe 20-ish extra health with 8 seconds, right? Again, it would require you to actually just, be wearing these exotics, but it's not the worst thing. If nobody else was running these exotics, you still can get a fair amount of benefit out of that. You can start trying to create a, orb of light type build, maybe running things like Charge with Light and High Energy Fire. You can make something like that work. Anyway, those are some ideas here. Like I stated, I think the idea of marking people with these abilities would be a really cool way of dialing in on these exotics to make them into a sort of mini game. I think that the scalability of where they are now is just unsalvageable. If we make them too strong, they're ridiculous. If they stay where they are, nobody uses them. So hopefully you guys like these ideas. By no means is this meant to be bulletproof or anything like that, but be sure to share if you have any ideas of your own in the comment section. I would love to get a conversation going. Hell, if we can get this up to Bungie's desk, maybe we can get some of these things buffed, because Lord knows they need some help. I mean, like I said, look at this thing. 28 intellect, 23 mobility. I don't care. I'm not going to run them. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. Bless your faces, and deuces.